Well, hello there, my dear viewers. It's me, Pixie, your fashion history lover doll artist. And today I bring to you a new custom doll video. A commissioned order for my customer I made recently. This character has no name since I haven't asked for it. But the idea was to create a kind of Victorian style doll based on this reference my customer showed me. She's supposed to be a gorgeous Victorian lady with crimson hair and black sclera eyes. She will be wearing ivory-colored shirt with puffy sleeves and a dark wine red layered skirt. Also, I will adorn her with a few accessories that are depicted in her reference pictures, such as a bag. So, as I can see her, she reminds me of a ghoul very much. So I called her Victorian Ghoul Project. And you may not know it, but the Victorian era is one of my favorite fashion eras in the history of fashion. The style is intricate, pompous, and abundant for details and layers. I like the variety of dresses, textures, and drapes that this style represents. Silhouettes are clearly defined and forms are precisely recognizable. It is not the easiest task to make such outfits for dolls. But most of the antique dolls wear this style. Maybe you also know the Japanese Lolita style is also majorly influenced by Victorian era fashion. And this doll is closer to a Lolita style. But today I want to tell you more about the Victorian style. A little bit of its history, what makes it the way it is, and some interesting and curious facts about Victorian era fashion. So sit comfortably and listen closely to absorb some new knowledge. Or just to relax and have a pleasant time watching me work on this commission. The Victorian era is period of reign of Queen Victoria, from 1837 until her death in 1901. During the Victorian era, the British economy flourished. The Industrial Revolution meant substantial technological progress and made Great Britain a forerunner for a considerable time. Furthermore, it was a peaceful time in Europe. Queen Victoria had a little political power or influence, but the domestic policy managed to keep everything stable. However, the international policies and colonization of British Empire were anything but peaceful. The change in work culture meant the people working outside of factories had leisure hours and could partake in popular forms of entertainment. Education level rose as well through a more formalized school system. Literature, theater galleries, music venues and dances and the opera were widely attended. The Victorian era saw fashion change sometimes dramatically every decade. From wide bell-shaped skirts over the crinoline to figure-hugging styles in the 1870s. There is a lot of variety comprised within the generalizing name Victorian era. The making of clothes and dress culture changed massively during the Industrial Revolution, which introduced the sewing machine and mechanical weaving and therefore made ready-made clothing possible. This overturned the entire textile industry and lastingly changed society. The rise of the middle class during this era had a formative effect on this time, brought on by the growing wealth that the Industrial Revolution made possible. Working class men and women could wear the same styles as the aristocracy, though they were wearing mass-produced versions made from cheaper materials. New models of retail, including department stores, magazines, and mail-order catalogs, meant everyone could keep up with the latest fashions. As a result, silhouettes and trends changed rapidly compared to earlier eras. One of the most notable shifts was that the fashion began to be differentiated by gender rather than class. This reflected the democratization of fashion as well as the changing roles of women in society. In the 18th century, men and women both wore highly decorative silk clothes that set them apart from the rest of society. But in the 19th century, women's fashion spread all along the social classes and became quite different from the clothes that men wore. Men began to dress in dark wool while women wore colorful silks. The 1820s and 30s were a fascinating time, sandwiched between the Regency and the onset of Victorian fashion. Towards the end of Regency Empire epoch, the empire waist slipped down about an inch every year. Therefore, existing gowns were altered according to the new fashion with wide waistbands to help lower it. In the mid-20s, the waist reached its natural position and it became again fashionable to be very slim. Consequently, corsets were worn again. The wasp waist was contrasted with increasingly full but sometimes only ankle-long skirts, sometimes even padded with animal hair to give them shape. And the little puffed sleeves on the early 1820s gave way to the so-called Lego mutton sleeves. Those sleeves, most popular in the mid-30s, needed to be supported by padding worn as underwear or enhanced with boning and therefore very hindering. A higher neckline was in vogue now. The new fashionable silhouette was broad shoulders through the sleeves, a very slim waist and a full skirt. Evening and ball gowns stayed low-cut and short-sleeved. After the fashion of pure white and pastel shades, and clothes became noticeably colorful and decorated. In the 1830s, cleans, a printed cotton fabric of Chinese origin, came into fashion. At this time, the Romantic movement had reached its zenith. Romantic fiction and historical novels and plays were loved very much by a great readership. As a consequence, the ladies wanted to dress like the work's heroines, so that, for instance, small ruffs were seen again. In Germany, this time is called Biedermeier. I talked about it more in my Cinderella video. During the Victorian era, it was customary to change one's dress several times a day, at least once in the late morning and once before dinner. There were different dresses for different parts of the day and different activities. The option to buy cheaper clothes made this vast variety possible, although only for women of certain income level. There was the dressing gown, the morning dress, the day dress to receive visitors, the visiting dress to go visit, the afternoon dress, the walking costume, the carriage dress, ball gowns, and the full dress toilet for every formal occasions at court. The Victorians were preoccupied with class, and fashion was one way of revealing or concealing one's status in society. Hands could tell you a lot about someone's position in the social hierarchy, and having soft, slender and white hands was considered a sign of refinement. That meant that your hands were not exposed to the sun or physical labor, which could leave one's skin tanned, calloused and rough. As a result, both men and women wore gloves not only to protect their skin from the elements, but also to hide the effects of working-class labor on their hands. In public, women always wore gloves, and it was considered improper to show one's bare hand outside the company of family or friends. Men were expected to be gloved as well, though it was more acceptable for men to remove their gloves in public. For instance, when shaking the hand of an acquaintance. Different gloves were expected for different occasions. According to the Gentleman's Book of Etiquette and Manual of Politeness, published in 1860, an upper-class gentleman might go through 6 different pairs of gloves in a single day, depending on his social calendar. In the 1840s, the huge Lego mutton sleeves vanished to be supplanted by tight-fitting ones. The skirts became even wider, supported by crinolines. Crin, French for horsehair, gave this undergarment its name. The crinoline is bell-shaped hoop skirt, at first stiffened with horsehair, later normally made of steel rings, and fastened around the waist with bands. Gowns had a low, wide neckline and small, close-fitting sleeves. Shiny, glimmering fabrics like silk and taffeta were the thing, just as lace in the form of trimming along the neckline as gloves and stoles. The waist appears so small through optical illusion. The very wide skirt and the bodice that is padded and cut to enhance the shoulders by big sleeves, ruffles and wide neckline form a contrast to the waist that makes it appear extra slim. It is not necessarily the work of lacing, a corset wore very tight. By the 1850s, a crinoline made of steel rings made it possible to reach a great size of skirts without using so many petticoats. To sit down or pass a narrow doorway, the wearer could just lift the rings of the hoop skirt on the side. Crinolines look very static and imposing, but they are highly movable. Evening gowns had a rather low neckline and were worn off the shoulders or just on the shoulders. Skirts with many layers of fabric creating horizontal valances were very fashionable. This flouncy style supported the bell shape and the width of the skirt even more. Although Victorian fashion looks very ornate and difficult, wearing it and getting dressed in it are no hours-long processes or hardships. Women in the Victorian era made an exaggerated posterior of the height of fashion. This was achieved through the invention of the bustle in 1857 by an American inventor named Alexander Douglas. An undergarment that hitched around the waist and featured a metal cage or padded cushion. Bustles were designed to create full rounded shape on the back of one's dress and provide support for heavy elaborate skirts. The 1860s witnessed the devastating American Civil War. By that time, the crinoline had reached an enormous measure. The skirts were now flatter at the front but jutted out more behind the women. The zenith of size with many meters of skirt circumference was passed by 1865. Floral motifs and paisley patterns in red hues were fashionable. Bustles weren't immediately popular, as ladies were still partial to the bell-shaped skirts created by crinolines. In around 1874, the bustle vanished for the sake of very slim and figure-hugging silhouette. The skirts are now very narrow, and hoop skirts and padding are removed for the so-called natural form. The bodice is lengthened well down to over the hips to create this smooth look. The skirts are usually decorated with ruffles, ruches, laces, tassels and silk flowers. The shoulders are very narrow with tight-fitting sleeves, and even the hairstyles are now high to support this slim and pillar-like silhouette. The style, however, lasted only until about 1882, when the bustle returned and the skirts once more became wide at the back. The second bustle era of the 1880s created an almost architectural style, with skirts that are round but very flat at the front while they protrude at the back. From 1884 onwards till 1914, this epoch also called the Glided Age. The decorative arts during this period are chiefly dominated by the Art Nouveau movement. In the 1880s and 1890s, the Japanese were very influential too, both in art and fashion. The dresses became more draped, more flowing and less geometrical. Moving into the 1890s, the silhouette changed yet again. The S-curve with a large pigeon breast, also called monobosom, was achieved through layers of ruffled corset covers and blouses. It was not necessarily the body that was forced into a natural shape, but rather the clothes that were styled and adapted to give that look. For a short time, around 1897, the large Lego mutton sleeves returned. Then the accentuation of the shoulders were exchanged for that of the bodice. So you can see how rapidly and vibrantly Victorian style roamed through the 19th century. And it is no surprise that it inspired so many artists in modern days. And my video is coming to an end. A small reminder that I now have a Patreon and it will be a great pleasure to see you there. I will make more videos about Victorian style in the future, but for this one, this is it. Hope you had fun and learned something new about fashion. Also, I want to thank my customer for making this order. Thank you. And thank you guys for staying here with me today. See you in my next videos. Bye!
Beneath the moon where shadows grow, angels sing a silent ode, trumpets call the stars to glow. In this night so full and broad, hear the melody arise to the night's eternal skies. We then go there and man of brights, breathe the night tonight as darkness weaves its silver thread. Echo dreams that lie ahead, strings and rows sweetly unite, crafting tales within the night. Till the symphony takes sight in a dance of shadows and light, in a lax motion